They said, "Happy birthday, Mom," in a text, while I watched them toast on a cruise I wasn't invited to. I lit the candles at 6 o'clock sharp, just as I had planned, watching the wax begin to drip as the roast stayed warm in the oven and the empty seats remained untouched. The dining room had never felt so still. Just 3 days earlier, my sister Ruth had promised to bring her peach pie, the one with the lattice crust that she always got a little too brown on the edges. We'd laughed on the phone about how we were both getting too old to bake standing up for too long. She told me, 65 deserves something warm and flaky. I agreed, but now, the only thing flaky was the silence, crumbling around me like the pastry that never made it through the door. The table was set for 8, every fork aligned just so, beside cream-colored napkins I'd ironed that morning. Each name card was placed in front of the bone china plates I only brought out for holidays and milestones. Marion Holloway, head of the table, Caleb, my son, on my right, his wife Betrayal next to him, little Mason beside her. He always liked sitting between his parents. On my left, Lucy's spot with her favorite plastic sippy cup, then Ruth, then her husband Joe. 8 chairs, 8 places, 8 reasons to believe I was still part of something. The roast had been slow cooking since noon. I'd seasoned it the same way Caleb liked when he was a teenager. Extra garlic, a touch of brown sugar on the crust. The green beans were tossed with bacon and onion the way my mother taught me. And the cake, well, that was my pride. Double-layered chocolate with buttercream frosting, piped with rosettes. I'd practiced the lettering 4 times before getting it just right. Happy 65th, Mom and Grandma. By 6:30, the candles were dancing softly, casting gold against the wine glasses. But the doorbell never rang. I checked the clock again. Still 6:30. No text, no call, no knock. I glanced down at my phone, rereading the calendar entry I'd created myself. Birthday dinner, 6 o'clock, Holloway residence. I'd sent it out to everyone as a reminder 2 days ago. Caleb had replied with a thumbs up. Ruth had said, "Got it." Even Betrayal had hearted the message. At 6:45, I called Caleb. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Betrayal's number. Same. I told myself maybe they were stuck in traffic, maybe something came up with the kids. Ruth and Joe? No answer either. Odd. Ruth always picked up on the second ring, even if she was elbow-deep in garden soil or up to her wrists in pie dough. I stood at the head of the table, holding onto the back of my chair like it was the only thing keeping me upright. I didn't want to sit. Not yet. Not until someone walked through the door with a bottle of wine and apologies about the rain or a slow car seat buckle. The roast was definitely starting to cool. The oven beeped once, signaling its slow descent into lukewarm. At 7, I put my phone down on the buffet table, next to the pitcher of ice water already sweating through the tablecloth. I walked into the kitchen and stared at the cake. The frosting looked a little too perfect now, untouched and smug. By 7:30, I couldn't stand anymore. I sat at my place at the table, napkins still folded neatly in my lap, and stared at the candles now half their original height. The silence in the house was no longer the comfortable kind I'd cherished after my husband died. It was hollow, like the walls themselves were leaning in, trying to figure out what went wrong. Then I made the mistake of opening Facebook. The first photo appeared like a slap. Caleb smiling wider than I'd seen in months, his arm around Betrayal, both standing on the deck of a massive cruise ship. Behind them, the Mediterranean stretched like a postcard dream. Ruth and Joe were there too, in matching sun hats, drinks in hand. Mason and Lucy in swimsuits, playing in pale sand. I scrolled in disbelief. Photo after photo. Hashtag family getaway. Caption, so grateful for this time together. Posted 1 hour ago. They hadn't forgotten. They'd left, deliberately. Scheduled a family vacation that began on my birthday and didn't say a word. I wasn't just excluded. I was erased. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Betrayal's smile looked different in the pictures. Like she'd won something. Like this was exactly where she believed she deserved to be, at the center of my family. My phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. Just 4 words. Sorry, forgot to mention. Forgot to mention, as if I was a dentist appointment, as if a cruise across the world was something you accidentally left off your to-do list. I set the phone down gently, too gently. It deserved to be flung against a wall, but my hands felt hollow, like paper. I walked back into the kitchen. The roast had gone cold. The candles were nearly dead. I turned off the oven, wrapped the cake in plastic wrap, and slid it into the fridge. The cake's weight in my hands felt almost shameful now, like hope being buried under layers of icing. One by one, I loaded the plates back into the cabinet. The sound of each dish touching the next echoed through the quiet house. I blew out the last candle, its smoke curling into the air like a sigh. I paused before turning off the dining room lights, catching sight of my reflection in the window. Something about the woman looking back at me stopped me cold. She looked smaller. Like someone had taken a piece out of her and forgot to put it back. The navy blue dress with its pearl buttons. Caleb once said it made me look elegant. Tonight, it just looked like I was trying too hard to belong in a photograph no one planned to take. All my life, I'd been the family glue, the organizer, the reminder sender, the one who remembered birthdays, who held secrets, who made peace. I'd been the safe place for my son when his father died. I'd been the warm kitchen on cold nights. And tonight, I was invisible, not forgotten, not overlooked, erased. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. In the bedroom, I changed out of the dress, folding it carefully and placing it back on the hanger. Maybe it would have better luck next year. Maybe not. I lay awake that night, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan above my bed, tracing its motion like it might give me answers. What did I do wrong? When did I become unnecessary? I thought back to Mason's 4th birthday party. I'd driven across town with a wrapped gift and balloons. Brielle met me at the door with that sweet, tilted head smile she was so good at. "Oh, Marion, didn't Caleb tell you? We had to move the party to tomorrow, a little mix-up." I remember hearing children laughing inside, balloons bobbing in the window. I called Caleb later. He was confused. "No, Mom. It was today. Meadow must have forgotten to tell you." Meadow. That was what Brielle had gone by then, a soft name. Brielle came later. She liked to reinvent herself. Emma's first day of preschool. I'd asked Brielle what time they were dropping her off. 7 in the morning, she said. Probably too early for you. But when I showed up at 7, the building was dark. At 8:30, kids trickled in. When I asked the teacher, she said Lucy had arrived 20 minutes ago. I missed her first day. I told myself it wasn't intentional. Last Christmas, Brielle called me 2 days before. Caleb's overwhelmed. We're keeping it small this year, just immediate family. I made lasagna for one, watched old movies. Ruth mentioned later they'd thrown a big dinner party. Caleb's college friends were there, even their new neighbors. I saw the photos. The house lit up like a greeting card. Everyone laughing, everyone glowing, everyone but me. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't bad luck. It was a pattern, a system, an operation. And the conductor of that orchestra wore pearl earrings and soft cashmere and always called me Marion, with a voice sweet enough to rot the teeth. I pulled my quilt up to my chin and stared into the dark, feeling the tight ache in my chest morph into something deeper, hotter, more certain. This wasn't just about missing a birthday. This wasn't a snub. This was a campaign, a quiet, strategic eviction from my own family's life. And for the first time in my life, I understood. There were enemies that didn't raise their voices, didn't throw punches. They smiled while they removed you piece by piece. I didn't sleep that night. But I decided something as the first gray light broke across my windows. Brielle Easton thought she'd pushed me out for good, but she'd underestimated the one thing that had kept this family upright for decades. Me. I looked at the empty table I'd set for 8, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if I was already gone to them. The doorbell rang at 10:07 in the morning, 3 days after my birthday, the first real sound in the house since that night. I was still in my robe, standing at the sink, rinsing the breakfast dishes I'd barely touched. My coffee had gone cold in its ceramic mug, the one with the faded lettering that read, "World's Best Mom," a gift from Caleb back when he still believed I was that. I stared at the front door for a moment longer than I should have, unsure if I'd imagined the sound, if I wanted to imagine it. People didn't visit much anymore, not without texting first, and after that birthday silence, I wasn't exactly eager for more reminders of where I stood. Still, something about that ring, sharp, nervous, carried weight. I dried my hands on the dish towel, wrapped my robe tighter, and made my way to the foyer. Through the frosted glass, I could see a man, mid-40s maybe, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. He had dark hair that needed a trim and a coat that looked too warm for the soft Indiana morning. His hands were in his pockets, but his eyes darted, up the street, back to the door, then down again. I nearly turned away. I wasn't in the mood for salesmen or canvassers or anyone asking for anything at all, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he stood, like gathering the nerve just to be here cost him something. I cracked the door, the chain still latched. "Can I help you?" He cleared his throat. "Are you Marion Holloway, Caleb's mother?" The mention of my son's name made my heart squeeze. I straightened a little. "Who's asking?" "My name is Nathan Reyes." He looked down like the words carried shame. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I think my son might be living in your son's house." The air went out of me. My first instinct was fear, some kind of custody scam or worse. My fingers tightened around the edge of the door. "What are you talking about?" His voice dropped, softer now, more broken. "I think Mason is my child." I stared at him through the chain. Mason, my grandson. 7 years old with his proud little chin and wide-set eyes. The boy who used to run to me with his arms open and a mouthful of stories. The boy who had slowly stopped doing that. And yet, in that moment, what caught me off guard wasn't the claim, but the ache in Nathan's voice. Like he wasn't here to make demands. Like he was here because carrying this truth alone had become unbearable. I closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it fully. "You'd better come in." He stepped inside cautiously, eyes flicking across the living room like he didn't expect to be welcomed. I motioned toward the couch. "Sit down. Do you want coffee?" He shook his head. I don't think I could keep anything down. I sat in the armchair across from him, legs tucked under the robe, my hands gripping the cup of lukewarm coffee I hadn't bothered to reheat. Nathan glanced around the room. His eyes landed briefly on a photo on the mantel. Caleb holding Mason as a baby, Brielle beaming beside them. He blinked hard and looked down. "I don't know where to start," he said. "Try the beginning," I offered, not unkindly. "It's been that kind of week." He took a breath. "Brielle and I were together about 8 years ago. Back then, she went by Meadow. We lived together in Sacramento. It was serious. Talked about marriage. Kids, all of it. Then she got pregnant." My stomach dropped. I didn't interrupt. I was thrilled. I wanted to marry her right away. But she started acting different, distant. Then one day, I came home from work and everything was gone. Her clothes, her photos, her toothbrush. No note. No goodbye. Just vanished. My fingers tightened around my mug. I filed a missing person report, hired an investigator. Nothing. It was like she'd never existed. The PI eventually said she probably left on purpose, that some people just don't want to be found. His voice cracked a little. I mourned her and the baby for months, maybe longer. Outside, a car rolled by, its tires crunching softly over leaves. The world kept moving, ignorant of what was shifting inside my living room. 3 months ago, he continued, I was in downtown Sacramento. I was there for a conference, and I saw her at a crosswalk with a little boy, 7, maybe 8, brown hair, a scar on his chin. He looked at me. She always said she loved riding bikes as a kid. that she wanted to teach her own someday. That little boy. He looked exactly like me at that age. The scar, the gap in his front teeth, even the way he tilted his head when he was listening. My heart skipped. Mason had that scar. He'd taken a spill on the sidewalk 2 years ago, trying to ride with no hands. Caleb called me from the hospital, frantic, saying Betrayal had gone pale when they wheeled him in. But how would this man know? I followed them for 3 blocks. I didn't approach. I just watched, and I knew. He reached into his coat and pulled out a photo. It was old and creased, a school portrait, maybe 2nd grade. A boy with the same chin as Mason, the same wide eyes, the same quiet mischief. I felt my breath catch, because I knew what I was seeing, and I hated what it meant. Nathan leaned forward. I hired a new investigator, a better one, found out her real name, Danica Wilder, multiple aliases, 2 previous marriages, both ended quickly, one in Nevada, the other in Oregon, alimony settlements, same pattern, fast relationship, fast marriage, withdrawal, disappearance. He placed a manila envelope on the coffee table between us. This is the DNA test. I managed to get a hair sample from a barber she takes the boy to, matched it to mine. I didn't reach for it yet. My hands had started trembling, and I didn't want him to see. And 99.7% probability of paternity, he said softly. He's my son. The words landed like thunder, loud but distant. Mason, my Mason, the boy who called Caleb Daddy, the boy I had held when he was barely breathing after that bike fall. The boy I made Halloween costumes for and taught how to braid string into a lanyard. He was mine in every way that counted, but he wasn't my blood, not through Caleb. I finally reached for the envelope, opened it with care. The paperwork was crisp, clinical, unforgiving. I read the number twice, then a 3rd time. I'm sorry, Nathan said. I know this must be... He's my grandson, I said, voice firm, quiet. Whatever this says. Nathan nodded. I know, I see how much you love him. I'm not trying to take him away, but I need to protect him. From her. From the lies. From whatever she's doing to your son. Because I've seen it before. And I think you've seen it too. I closed the envelope. You've been watching. From a distance. I wanted to be sure before I did something. But when I saw the cruise photos, and I noticed you weren't in a single one, he looked at me, something like grief in his eyes. That's when I realized she's doing it again, erasing people, one by one. My voice was barely a whisper. You saw that? He nodded. And I saw the comments, the posts. Mason tagging along like everything is normal, like she didn't rewrite history. I sat back, the weight of it all pressing into my bones. 7 years, a life built on lies, a child caught in the middle, a son who never saw it coming, and me, the mother who'd stepped back too many times, given the benefit of the doubt too many times, accepted too many kind-sounding lies. What do you want from me? I asked. Nathan's reply was simple. Help. Help me protect him. Help me expose her, not for revenge, for truth, for the kids, for Caleb. I looked at the photo on the mantel again. I remembered the day it was taken. Mason was barely walking. Caleb had been so proud, Betrayal glowing beside him. Back then, I thought she was the best thing to ever happen to him. Now, I wasn't so sure she hadn't been the beginning of the end. I'll need time, I said. Nathan nodded. Take what you need, but we don't have forever. She's good at disappearing when the heat turns up. He handed me a business card. That's my number. Call me when you're ready. I watched him go. The door clicked shut behind him like a lock sealing in a secret. The envelope sat on the table. The truth, printed in black and white. Evidence that could upend everything or save it. Maybe both. I stood there for a long time before finally moving toward the kitchen window. Outside, the leaves had started falling in earnest. The tree line swayed gently in the wind. Inside, it was still, but no longer hollow. I didn't know whether to scream, to cry, or to start making a plan. The more I looked at old family photos, the more I realized I'd been erased frame by frame and never noticed it happening. It started with a picture Ruth had sent me 5 years ago, Christmas morning at Caleb's house. The kids were in matching flannel pajamas, tearing through wrapping paper with squeals of delight. Caleb was holding Lucy on his lap. Brielle, or rather Danica, had one hand on Mason's shoulder, the other holding a mimosa. Everyone was smiling, backlit by the warm glow of the fireplace. I remembered that day, only I wasn't there. That was the first time Brielle had called me just 2 days before the holiday, her voice sweet but clipped, explaining that Caleb was feeling overwhelmed and they needed to keep things quiet. Just immediate family, she'd said gently, as if I weren't part of that. I'd believed her. Now, with the DNA envelope resting on my nightstand and Nathan's words echoing in my ears, I began looking backward. Not sentimentally this time, but analytically. I combed through my emails, text threads, and the dusty photo albums in the hallway closet. I pulled out old calendars. Yes, I kept them. Marked with birthday parties, baby showers, school events. Events I hadn't attended, either because I was told they'd been rescheduled or because I wasn't told at all. By mid-morning, the living room floor was covered with photographs and pages torn from the backs of spiral-bound planners. Mason's 3rd birthday, there I was, standing beside the cake, smiling at a camera Brielle had held. But in later years, I was no longer present. His 6th birthday party, held at the Community Rec Center, featured friends, balloons, a bounce house, and a very tall, very blue cake. I hadn't even known it happened. At first I thought I was overreacting, misremembering. But then I pulled up Brielle's social media, under both names. I searched back 7 years. Using timelines Nathan had helped me reconstruct. With each scroll, each photo, my heart sank further. There she was, holding newborn Mason, hospital tag still on her wrist. The post date was only 6 months after she met Caleb. I clicked to enlarge it, studying the timestamp. It didn't add up. Mason had been born 3 weeks early, or so we'd been told. But now, looking at the dates side by side, it was clear. He wasn't early. He was right on time for someone else. I started writing things down, details, dates, inconsistencies, on a yellow legal pad. The handwriting was tight and sharp, unlike the cursive I usually reserved for grocery lists or birthday cards. This wasn't a letter to a loved one. This was evidence. In the corner of my living room sat an old filing cabinet, mostly filled with home warranties and appliance manuals, but I cleared the top drawer and began filing everything. The printed DNA report, photocopies of marriage licenses from Oregon and Nevada, Brielle's name change documentation, the fake addresses she'd used, Nathan's investigation summary, and photos he'd shared of Mason's public appearances, soccer games, a science fair. Always smiling, always hers. That afternoon, I met Nathan at a small coffee shop off Route 30. It was the kind of place where you could sit for hours and no one would rush you. I chose a booth in the back, the vinyl seats cracked in places but clean. A waitress brought me a lukewarm refill without asking. I stirred it absently as Nathan walked in. He looked tired. A kind of tired that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from too much truth pressing down all at once. He slid into the booth across from me. "You found something." I nodded, reaching into my bag. I handed him a folder marked Danica Wilder Timeline. Inside were printouts, notes, and highlighted inconsistencies. She told Caleb Mason was premature, but she left you right around the 2nd month of her pregnancy. That means Mason was born exactly on time. She just fudged the dates. Nathan exhaled. I knew it. I suspected it. But seeing it all lined up like this, it's another thing entirely. She knew what she was doing, I said quietly. She needed someone steady, someone naive. She found Caleb, got pregnant, moved fast, told him it was his. He nodded. That's what she does. finds decent men and builds castles out of their blind spots. I looked at him. I don't know what you want to do with this yet, but I know what I'm going to do. Nathan straightened slightly. Tell him? Soon, but not yet. I want to control the how and the where. I want to be the one who breaks it. Gently, if that's even possible. He nodded. He deserves to hear it from you, not from me, not from a courtroom. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the folder between us. Outside, cars passed in slow procession. A school bus hissed to a stop at the corner. Nathan leaned in. I know this is hard, but you're doing the right thing. I'm not doing it for me, I said and meant it. I'm doing it for Mason, for Caleb, for Lucy, for everyone she's played like pieces on a board. I returned home just before dusk. The sky had turned the color of faded denim, streaked with clouds that glowed copper in the last breath of sunlight. I opened the door and paused at the threshold. It was quiet again, but not the kind of quiet that pressed on my ribs. This was the quiet of knowing. The kind that follows the gathering of tools before a job. I set the folder down on the dining table, the same one I'd set for 8. I laid out the documents like a lawyer preparing for trial. DNA test, birth timeline, marriage records, name change affidavits, social media screenshots, and a page I'd typed up myself, a timeline of lies. It began with met Caleb and ended with family cruise, Marion excluded. I placed it all in a fresh manila envelope and sealed it with a piece of blue painter's tape. Then I wrote in clear block letters, for Caleb, truth first, love after. My hands trembled slightly as I slid it into the drawer of my sideboard, beside the linen napkins and wedding silver I hadn't used since Mason's christening. That night, I climbed into bed and sat upright against the headboard. I didn't sleep. Instead, I reread my notes, rechecked my math, reviewed each piece of evidence like it was a recipe passed down for generations, something sacred, something that had to be right. Brielle thought she'd cornered us, thought time and silence would protect her. But what she didn't know, what she'd never understood, was that memory has its own teeth. She may have built her kingdom on lies, but I've just found the cornerstone. The kitchen clock ticked past 7:30 on a Thursday evening when I finally picked up the phone and called Caleb. I'd rehearsed the conversation a dozen different ways, pacing from one end of the living room to the other with the manila envelope resting like a loaded weapon on the dining table. But none of my imagined versions prepared me for the hollow way his voice sounded when he picked up. "Hey, Ma," he said, distracted. "Everything okay?" There was a pause. A child's voice echoed in the background. Lucy, I thought, asking for more juice. A television hummed low. Domestic normalcy. "I need to see you," I said. "In person. No kids. Just you." He hesitated. "Is something wrong?" "Yes," I said, "but it's something I need to tell you face to face. Please." He sighed. A long one that felt heavier than it should have. "All right. Tomorrow after work? 7? Here," I said. "I'll cook." The line went dead shortly after, and I stood there with the phone still pressed to my ear, my hand trembling just a little. I'd made meals for Caleb 1,000 times over the years, but this one would carry the weight of undoing years of deception. This one would not be served with laughter or small talk. This one would break something wide open. The next day, I woke early and began preparing everything. I kept my hands busy with slicing onions, rolling dough, browning beef. I made his favorite, shepherd's pie, and baked cornbread from the same mix I'd used when he was 10 and lost his first baseball game. Food was a language I understood better than words, and tonight I would need both. At 6:45, headlights flashed across the front window. I wiped my hands on my apron and straightened my blouse. He walked in without knocking, like he always used to, and set his keys on the counter. "Smells like childhood," he said, forcing a smile. I gave him a small one in return. I thought comfort might help. We sat down at the table. I served him a generous portion, though I didn't take any for myself. My appetite had been missing for days. He noticed. "You not eating?" "I will," I said softly. "After." That made him pause, fork hovering halfway to his mouth. "I need you to listen carefully tonight, Caleb, all the way through. I'm going to say things that will hurt, but I'm not saying them to hurt you. I'm saying them to show you the truth." His face fell a little. "Is this about Brielle?" I nodded. "It is." He sighed again and pushed his plate away, untouched. "I figured this was coming. You've been cold about her for years." "It's not about feelings," I said. "It's about facts, about protecting you and the kids." I rose and walked to the sideboard, retrieving the manila envelope. I set it between us. "Inside, this is everything I've discovered in the past week. DNA results, marriage records, timeline inconsistencies, photos, social media posts, all of it." His brows furrowed. "What are you saying?" I looked him square in the eye, the same hazel green ones he'd had since birth. "I'm saying Mason isn't your biological son." The silence that followed was thunderous. He didn't move at first, just stared. Then his lips parted, but no sound came out. I waited. He finally leaned forward, his hands resting on the envelope. "You're wrong." "I'm not," I said gently. "I wish I were, but the DNA says otherwise. Brielle, Danica, is not who she says she is. She had a relationship before you. She got pregnant and vanished. Then she met you. She told you Mason was yours when he wasn't." He opened the envelope, his eyes scanning the documents with increasing speed. I watched the shift in his face: disbelief, confusion, betrayal. He reached the DNA report and read it twice, just like I had. "This can't be," he whispered. She said." "I know what she said," I murmured. "And she lied." He stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. "Why now? Why are you doing this now?" "Because I met him," I said. "Nathan, the real father. He came to me, not to you, because he wanted to be careful, thought maybe I could help, and I realized I'd been blind for too long." Caleb ran a hand through his hair, then dropped into the chair again. "This ruins everything." "No," I said firmly. "This reveals everything. There's a difference." His eyes welled, and I reached for his hand, squeezing it. "I'm still your mother. Mason's still your son in every way that matters. But this is the truth, and the truth needs light." He didn't speak for a long time. The food on the table had gone cold, untouched. Eventually, he asked, "What do I do?" "You protect them," I said. "You talk to Nathan. You decide what comes next, but you do it knowing the full picture." He nodded slowly, then pulled his hand away and stood. "I need time." "I know," I said. He walked to the door, stopped halfway and looked back. "You were right to tell me. I wish I'd seen it first." Then he left, and I stood in the quiet kitchen, staring at the untouched plate across from mine. The clock on the wall ticked on, indifferent to the cracks that had formed in the world beneath it. The next morning, Caleb didn't call. Neither did he the day after. But on the third day, my phone lit up with his name. He asked if Nathan could come by. He wanted to hear it from both of us. We sat in the living room, Caleb on the couch, Nathan in the recliner, and me with the envelope again in hand, this time opened. Nathan told his story, carefully, with no embellishment. Caleb listened, stone-faced, until Nathan described the crosswalk moment, the moment he saw Mason again after all those years. "He turned and looked at me," Nathan said, and I swear it felt like the world stopped. Caleb's voice was raw. "He calls me Dad. He loves me." Nathan nodded. "And I would never take that from you. I just want to be in his life, if there's room." That was the moment Caleb broke. His shoulders sagged, his head dropped, and when he finally looked up, it was at me. "Do you think I'm a fool?" "No," I said. "I think you're someone who wanted to believe in love. That's not foolish. That's human." He closed his eyes. What do I do? Start with the truth, Nathan said. Tell Mason a version he can understand. Let him know he's loved by more people than he ever imagined. Caleb nodded. And Brielle? My voice was steady. That's up to you. But she's not finished, Caleb. She doesn't stop until she's forced to. You have to be the one to stop her. He sat quietly, weighing it all. Then, for the first time in days, he looked resolved. I'll file for a legal review of custody. I want you there, Nathan. And you, Mom. I need both of you. We agreed. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, we stayed around the kitchen table, not for food this time, but for planning, for healing, for rebuilding something she'd spent years trying to unravel. And yet, deep inside, I knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't go down without a fight. I saw it in her eyes when she finally walked through my front door uninvited, lips curled in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the way she shut the door, deliberate, soft, as if it were her house and I were the one intruding. That told me this wouldn't be a simple conversation. She stood there in my foyer like she belonged, her hands folded neatly in front of her, coat unbuttoned, lipstick fresh. She wore a navy blouse I hadn't seen before, something expensive with little gold buttons at the wrists. Her heels made no sound on the wood floor as she stepped inside, but her presence thudded through the house like a storm warning. I thought we should talk, Brielle said. I stared at her for a moment. Is that what we're calling it now? She smiled then, tight, controlled. You've been very busy, Marion. I didn't answer. Instead, I motioned toward the living room with a nod. She walked past me with the grace of someone used to being obeyed. But I noticed her eyes flick around the space, taking mental inventory. The yellow legal pad on the side table, the open drawer of the filing cabinet, the missing manila envelope. She sat on the edge of the couch, legs crossed perfectly. I remained standing. I'm going to be direct, she said, brushing an invisible thread off her knee. You need to stop whatever you think you're doing. Now. My hands folded over each other at my waist. Calm. Always calm. And what exactly do you think I'm doing? I asked. She tilted her head. You've been poking around in places you shouldn't. Bringing that man, Nathan, back into our lives. Stirring up confusion for Mason, causing tension between Caleb and me. That confusion, as you call it, is the truth, I said. Mason has a right to know where he comes from. She snorted quietly. The first real crack in her mask. He comes from Caleb. Caleb raised him, changed his diapers, stayed up when he was sick. That's what matters. Biology's a footnote. That's not your decision to make, I replied, and it never was. She stood abruptly, brushing past me toward the bookshelf. Her fingers grazed a framed photo of Lucy and Mason, taken last summer at the lake. Do you know what your problem is, Marion? You think motherhood is about facts, records, DNA reports. But it's about control, influence, and I've had that since day one. She turned toward me, her smile now gone. You're not going to destroy this family. I won't let you. I took a slow step forward. No, Brielle. Or should I say, Danica, you already did. Her face flickered just for a heartbeat. You don't know what you're talking about. I know about the name change, the marriage in Oregon, the restraining order, the falsified medical forms, the manipulated due date. I know it all. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. I filed it, I continued. Every piece of it. I gave Caleb copies. Nathan, too. If something happens to me, if you try to twist this any further, it's all documented. You can't erase this with charm or crocodile tears. She moved toward me then, slowly. I didn't flinch. I saw her clearly now, not the polished daughter-in-law she'd pretended to be, but the skilled deceiver who had built her life on shadows. You think you've won something here? She whispered. No, I said. I think the truth has. She laughed, low and bitter. You're underestimating how far I'll go. I'm counting on it, I said. She stared at me a long time, then turned on her heel and walked toward the door. But before opening it, she paused. "You've made this ugly," she said. "You brought in strangers. You went digging through things that should have stayed buried." I tilted my head. "Funny. I thought you were the one who buried them." She didn't respond. She opened the door and slipped out without another word, her silhouette swallowed by the darkening porch light. When the door clicked shut, I let myself breathe. It was the first time since her arrival that my shoulders came down from their tightened brace. Later that evening, I called Caleb. I told him she'd been by, that she knew. He was quiet for a long time before saying, "She asked me to leave you out of it." "Said you were just confused." "Are you?" "No," he said, "not anymore." The next few days passed in a strange, suspended state. Caleb filed an emergency petition to modify custody, citing the new evidence and requesting a temporary hearing to establish supervised visitation until the matter could be settled. It wasn't easy. Mason was old enough to sense something, and Lucy began waking up at night, calling for both her parents. Nathan stayed close, but cautiously. He didn't want to appear to be muscling in. What surprised me most was Caleb. He didn't fall apart. He didn't lash out. He adapted. He asked questions. He read documents. He talked to Nathan, man to man. They sat on my porch one night while the kids were inside watching cartoons, and I listened from the kitchen window as they spoke quietly about transitions, about honesty, about what being a father really meant. It wasn't easy for Caleb, but it was honest, and that, at last, gave him strength. A week later, the hearing date was set. Caleb served Betrayal with the papers at her work. According to him, she didn't even blink. She smiled, he told me over coffee, said, "Let the games begin." I sat back in my chair. "She doesn't know this isn't a game anymore." He nodded. "She will." We started preparing. I helped him organize the files, sort through timelines. We contacted a child psychologist to help explain things gently to the kids, especially Mason. The night before the hearing, I tucked Mason into bed at my house. He looked up at me, eyes wide. "Grandma," he said, "is Daddy mad at Mommy?" I smoothed his hair and sat on the edge of the bed. Sometimes grown-ups have to fix things that got broken. It doesn't mean they don't love you. He nodded sleepily, but I knew the weight of it would settle more deeply in the coming days. When I went back downstairs, Nathan was waiting in the kitchen, leaning against the counter. "She'll come at you next," he said. "She has nothing to lose." "I know," I replied, "but I have everything to protect." He nodded slowly. "I'll be there tomorrow." "If they ask me to testify." "You don't have to do that." "Yes," he said, "I do." The next morning, we dressed like armor. Caleb in a suit that hadn't fit him this well since his wedding. Me in navy slacks and a cardigan buttoned all the way to the top. Nathan in a charcoal blazer, solemn and ready. We drove together to the courthouse, the early sunlight cutting through the windshield in clean, golden bars. In the hallway outside the family courtroom, we waited in silence. Then the elevator doors opened, and out stepped Betrayal, flanked by a man in an expensive suit and a woman with a stiff, corporate smile. Her eyes locked on mine, and this time, her smile reached all the way up. She was holding Lucy's hand, and Mason was nowhere in sight. The moment the bailiff called our names, the air in the courtroom shifted, tightened like a pulled thread. We walked in behind Caleb, filing slowly into the polished wood and beige-painted room that smelled faintly of lemon oil and bureaucracy. The judge, a woman with kind eyes and a braided bun, glanced over her glasses and gave a faint nod. There were no juries here, no grand speeches, just quiet records and heavy truths. Betrayal sat across the aisle, composed and radiant, her attorney whispering something close to her ear as Lucy climbed onto her lap, unaware of the storm around her. But Mason wasn't there. That absence hung in the space like a missing painting on a familiar wall. I tried to stay focused, calm, My fingers gripped the edge of my handbag, knuckles tight. Nathan sat beside me in the pew, silent but coiled, ready. Caleb leaned forward at the table, his expression unreadable but resolute. When asked to speak, he did, measured, clear. He laid out the DNA results, the timing inconsistencies, the record of Danica Wilder and her erased past. He admitted he'd once loved Betrayal with everything he had, that Mason was his son in all the ways that mattered, except one. Betrayal's lawyer objected to nearly everything, called it emotional speculation, irrelevant history, character assassination. The judge overruled most of it. Then came Nathan's turn. He stood tall but not intimidating, wearing the steady nerves of someone who had rehearsed this too many nights in silence. He told his story without embellishment, how he'd lost contact, how he found the truth, how he hadn't come to take Mason away but to be part of his life, however that might look. The judge listened, nodding occasionally, and I could see she wasn't unmoved. Betrayal was last. She stood slowly, her blouse perfectly pressed, her hands folded calmly in front of her. Her voice was low, deliberate, smooth. "I did what I had to do to give my son a stable life," she said. "Nathan abandoned us. He was unstable. When I met Caleb, I saw safety, love. Mason saw a father, and that's what he got." There it was, a complete rewrite of the past. She continued, painting herself the martyr. Said I was meddling, said I was jealous. Said Nathan was a stranger who had no place in the boy's life. Then she looked at the judge, eyes wide and glassy. "Your Honor, children need consistency, not confusion. They need love, not DNA." The room was quiet when she sat. I didn't expect to be called, but the judge surprised us. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said gently, "would you like to speak?" I rose slowly, walked toward the front. My knees ached, my mouth was dry, but my voice was steady. I raised Caleb with honesty. I began. "Even when it hurt, I never lied to him about who his father was or about the struggles we had. I didn't protect him from truth. I taught him how to carry it." I looked at Betrayal then. Betrayal, Danica, built her house out of lies. She kept secrets. She manipulated people who trusted her. She did it for control, not love. I turned back to the judge, and now she's teaching Mason the same thing. That hiding truth is safer than telling it. That you can love someone and still deceive them if the lie feels kinder. I paused, but love without truth is just performance. The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell." I sat back down, hands trembling now. We waited. The judge reviewed the documents silently for what felt like forever. Then she looked up. "The court finds sufficient evidence that Mr. Caldwell was misled regarding paternity, and that the minor child, Mason, has a right to know both the man who raised him and the man who fathered him, effective immediately. Temporary shared custody is awarded to Mr. Caldwell, with supervised visitation granted to Mr. Wilder. A full review will follow." Betrayal's face was unreadable. The judge's gaze turned sharp. Furthermore, the court issues a temporary order restricting Ms. Wilder from removing the children from the state until further notice. Betrayal blinked. Then the gavel fell, and the room exhaled. Outside the courthouse, it was raining, soft and persistent. Nathan and Caleb stood under the overhang, speaking in low voices. I stepped away to give them space and found myself staring at the parked cars beyond the wet sidewalk, heart still thudding. That's when I saw her, Betrayal, standing beneath a red umbrella near her car, her phone to her ear. She wasn't crying. She was smiling. I couldn't hear her words, but I didn't need to. I could read the pattern in her face. She had a backup plan. I hurried back toward the others. "She's planning something," I said. "She's not done." That night, Caleb installed new locks at his house. He moved Mason and Lucy into my guest rooms for a few nights. Nathan came by with coloring books and a pizza. The kids were quiet, confused, but distracted enough by the novelty of sleeping in Grandma's house to fall asleep early. We adults sat in the kitchen, a familiar circle now with warm coffee and cold dread. Caleb opened his laptop. I've started documenting everything. Emails, voicemails, times she's late, things the kids say. She won't stop, I said again. Not until she's blocked from every angle. I know, Caleb replied, which is why I need the next part. He looked at Nathan. And you're sure she used that trust fund? Nathan nodded. I couldn't get into her personal bank accounts, but I did find a loan she took out last year, one tied to an asset she claimed to own. My house, I said quietly. Nathan nodded again. It looks like she forged your name. Claimed you gave her partial ownership through a quitclaim deed. My stomach dropped. She stole my house, I whispered. Caleb's face hardened. Can we prove it? We can, Nathan said, but it means filing another case. I leaned back in my chair. She used my name, my kindness. She waited until I was alone, vulnerable, then struck. Nathan leaned forward. That's her pattern, but now we have the paper trail. I nodded slowly. Then we end this, for good. The next morning, we went to the county records office. We pulled every document with my name on it. And sure enough, there it was, dated 18 months ago. A fake quitclaim deed transferring 50% ownership of my property to Betrayal Caldwell. Signature forged, not even skillfully. The clerk looked at me with wide eyes. Did you authorize this? No, I said firmly, and I'm pressing charges. We filed the fraud report that afternoon. The detective we spoke with nodded grimly. You're not the first. Danica Wilder has been flagged before. She changes states, names, starts fresh, but she always slips. Back home. I sat at the kitchen table alone for a moment. I looked out at the swing set Caleb had built, the rain finally tapering off. The sky was a dusky blue, promising a clearer tomorrow. I had lost a lot these past years. Time, peace, trust. But I had gained something too. I had found my voice. And I had used it. When the knock came at the door around 8 p.m., I expected it to be Caleb. But it wasn't. It was the county sheriff. We have a warrant, he said. Is Mrs. Caldwell home? I blinked. Which one? He looked down at his paperwork. Danica Wilder, also known as Betrayal Caldwell. I stepped aside. She's not here, but I can tell you where she's going. His brow lifted. Where? I looked him straight in the eye. She's trying to flee the state tonight. There's a particular kind of silence that comes after a storm, the kind that settles not just over the house, but within you. That's the silence I sit in now, not hollow or empty, but full. Full of things finally spoken, truths finally unearthed, and wounds finally cleaned, even if they're still healing. The children are upstairs, sleeping soundly in the beds I used to tuck Caleb into long ago. I can hear the creak of the floorboards as they shift with the night air, the hum of the old refrigerator, the comforting chorus of a house that's lived through something and kept standing. I never expected life to turn in this direction. Never imagined that the child I once rocked to sleep would stand in a courtroom defending me, defending himself, and discovering that the woman he trusted most had been living a lie. I never imagined that all those quiet sacrifices, those checks written without question, those holidays overlooked, those little slights I swallowed, would one day gather like stones and become the very foundation of justice. But they did. I've learned that sometimes the people who smile at you the most are the ones building the deepest pit behind your back. I've learned that deceit doesn't always wear fangs. It often wears pearls and whispers compliments. And I've learned, most importantly, that silence is not the same as weakness. I was silent for a long time, not because I was blind, but because I believed love meant forgiveness, meant understanding. But love does not mean self-erasure. It does not mean bending until you break. Betrayal, or Danica, or whatever name she tries next, mistook my patience for passivity. She thought she could thread lies through the seams of my family and I wouldn't notice. But I did notice. I saw the way the children stopped running into my arms. I saw how Caleb's shoulders tightened around her voice. I saw the erasure happening in real time, and for a while, I let it happen, thinking I was just imagining it. I wasn't. I remember the cold clarity the morning after they left for that cruise without telling me. The plate I had set, untouched. The gift I had wrapped, unopened. I remember thinking, this is what invisibility feels like. But in that moment of being forgotten, I remembered myself. And once I did, everything changed. People will tell you revenge is bitter. I say justice, when done quietly, is like water seeping through cracks. It finds its way in, patiently, persistently, until the lies rot from the inside. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break down doors. I opened files. I made calls. I remembered things they hoped I had forgotten. I remembered birthdays and dates and the soft curve of Mason's cheek that looked too much like someone else's. I remembered a phone number scribbled in an old notebook. I remembered how many times I had paid the property taxes, how many times Betrayal had laughed it off as my duty as the grandma. I remembered, and I wrote it down, because I knew one day remembering would matter more than anything. It wasn't just about me. It was about reclaiming the future for the children. It was about showing them that truth matters. That even when people lie with a smile, even when they rewrite history, there is still a reckoning. And sometimes that reckoning is their name being called by a sheriff under a porch light. The courtroom didn't clap. The judge didn't smile. But I saw it in Caleb's face, in the way he stood taller when the order was granted. I saw it in Nathan's steady nod. I saw it when Mason reached for both men's hands at the same time, unafraid, unconfused. That boy didn't lose anything. He gained everything. And I gained peace. I spend my mornings now with coffee and crossword puzzles. The house is quieter, yes, but it's peaceful, not lonely. Caleb drops the kids off on Saturdays, and sometimes Nathan joins us for dinner. The laughter that echoes through my kitchen isn't forced anymore. It's light. It's free. I make blueberry pancakes on Sundays, and Mason insists on flipping his own, even if he splatters half the batter. We tell the truth now. Always. Even when it's hard. Sometimes, when I sit out on the porch, I think about Betrayal. I wonder where she's landed next, what name she's using now, what story she's telling. But the wonder doesn't come with rage anymore. It comes with a quiet kind of sorrow. For her, and for the people she's still pretending to love. You see, I was never out to ruin anyone. I only ever wanted to protect what mattered. And now, with the lies exposed and the damage done, I realize the most powerful act I ever committed was simply not looking away. To anyone out there who feels like they're being erased, who's quietly enduring the sharp cuts of dismissal, I say this: you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight with fists. There is a strength in stillness, in gathering your truth like kindling until the day you need to light the fire. And when that day comes, it will warm you, it will illuminate the lies, and it will burn away every doubt you ever had about your worth. The moral of my story: self-respect isn't given, it's reclaimed. And kindness, when taken for weakness, can become the sharpest blade in the drawer. So if my story moved you, I invite you, gently and with all my heart, to like this video. Let it be a small act of acknowledgement, a quiet nod from one soul to another. And if you'd like to hear more stories like mine, of truth, quiet strength, and justice served without shouting, please subscribe to our channel. There's more to come. And trust me, the next story may just be your own.